What's up everyone, welcome to another video. In this video, I will replace the combination valve, also known as the air pump check valve or the secondary air injection check valve, in a 2013 Volkswagen Passat with the 2.5 liter engine. First, release the hood latch, open the hood, and support it with the prop rod. Next, disconnect the air intake tube by compressing the clamp with pliers and sliding it off the flange. Then, pull the end of the tube off of the flange. And remove these two screws straddling the air intake tube to disconnect it from the front of the vehicle. And now you're ready to pull the cover off of the top of the engine. It's held in place at the four corners, but give it some muscle and pop it up and off. These rubber grommets just push onto these posts on the top of the engine to secure it. And with the cover removed, the valve is right here. First, remove this hose. You should be able to squeeze the top and bottom of the connector together and pull the hose out. But it was hard. I couldn't pull it off. I used a screwdriver to carefully help pry the sides of the connector out as I pulled. Next, disconnect the electrical connector. There's a tab on the bottom. Just push it down like a button and pull it off of the valve. Then disconnect this metal tubing. It has a 2-bolt flange at the end, which is attached to the valve with 2 T30 Torx screws. And the screws are removed. So here's the existing valve, and here's the new one. It's secured with 4 mounting bolts. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And they require a 10mm socket. So let's get to it. I was able to access the top 2 bolts from above, and remove them without any difficulty. The bottom 2 bolts were more challenging, but I was able to slip my arm under the coolant lines, and get my hand back down there and reach the bolts. Here's the bolt on the passenger side. And here's the bolt on the driver's side. This one was a little tougher to get access to because there's a wire loom that runs right next to it, and you will have to push the wires over a little bit to get a socket onto the bolt head. And now it's free! Just pull it up and out. And with the valve removed, let's take a look back there. Here are the 2 top mounting holes. And here are the 2 bottom mounting holes. Note that there's a bracket with through holes that line up with the mounting holes. The valve goes between the bracket and the block. And let's take a closer look at the valve and the mounting bolts. Flipping it over, I was able to get this bolt with a socket wrench no problem. This hole is counterbored, so it's a little more tricky to get the socket in there, and I couldn't rotate it with my fingers, so I had to use the socket to rotate it. This bottom bolt was no problem with the socket wrench, and this is the one that had the wire harness next to it, which had to be pushed over a little to get a socket on the bolt head. The 2 bottom bolts are the same, and they're short bolts. And the 2 top bolts are the same, and they're long bolts. So here's the new replacement part. The bottom gasket was shipped installed, and the top gasket was shipped loose. So let's start the installation. If you're replacing the top gasket, remove the old one from the tubing flange. Open up your new gasket and bend the legs in a little bit so they will grip the flange. Otherwise, it may not grip and it'll just fall off. Then push the new gasket onto the flange to install it, with the big tab facing down. Next, lower the new valve into place. And make sure the bottom slides in between the bracket and the block. Then, reinstall the 4 bolts. Those bottom 2 were a little challenging to align down there through the bracket and with that wire loom in the way, but I got them. And the top 2 bolts were no problem. This is the one with the counterbored hole, and this is the other one. I will point out that if you drop your wrench or a screw or something like that, don't worry about it. Get out your magnetic stick, fish it onto the splash shield, and retrieve your item. If you don't have a magnetic stick, good luck. Next, let's reinstall the Torx screws to connect the metal tube. Line up the tube as needed to line up the holes. Then, reinstall the electrical connector with the locking tab down, and make sure to push it all the way on until it clicks. And last is the hose elbow. I pushed this thing with all the strength I had in my hands, and it would not go all the way on. There's nothing solid around to pry against, so I cautiously used a big pair of channel locks to fully seat it. Then it's time to reinstall the engine cover, lining up the 4 rubber bushings in the cover with the 4 posts on the engine, and just push them down. Reinstall these 2 screws, 1 and 2. Then reinstall the intake hose onto the flange. Push it all the way up onto the flange until it's fully seated, and squeeze the hose clamp to open it. Slide it back up and position it into place, and release the hose clamp to close it. And that wraps this up. I hope you found it helpful. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.